So, welcome everyone who's joined us so far for our seminar this evening on understanding your HOA. And we actually have as a subtitle to this, the risks of not understanding your HOA. And I think that's a little more, probably a little more important to understand. Before we begin, I always start these seminars with a quick introduction to Perisson Real Estate. So my name is Jean Joe. I'm the broker and owner of Perisson Real Estate. The name Perisson comes from the Greek word for abundance and overflow. And our company's vision is to serve our clients, colleagues, and community so everyone can thrive and experience abundance in their real estate lives. We've been doing seminars ever since the beginning, in person initially, and then went to online, especially after the COVID pandemic started. And these seminars are kind of an overflow of this principle, the guiding principle for our company. And so I think it's really important to spread, to share what we know, to spread information. And to that end, often, I'll invite my colleagues, other real estate agents, to come and join us and to invite their clients as well, because this is not to be a sales pitch. This is really to try to help everyone understand a little more about real estate and the different issues involved. So just quickly, in terms of the real estate market, with condos and single family homes, there's some big differences. These are just a few of them. One is that the condo market was more impacted by the COVID pandemic, which makes sense intuitively if you think about it. People needed or wanted more private indoor and outdoor space. So this idea of, well, we can use the common area kind of went away or was gone for a while during the lockdown. And so many people started feeling the need for more of their own outdoor space and a lot bigger indoor space. And so the condo market did get impacted uh, much more than single family homes did. It was also impacted more by the movement of high tech companies because people who live in condos or buy condos, many of them in our area at least, and in San Francisco as well, uh, tend to be, the professionals working in high tech companies who might be able to work were able to work remotely because of the pandemic. And so they chose to do so, to get out of the city and maybe go rent somewhere else. And so both the rental market and the condo market did experience some amount of the impact due to the pandemic, much more so than a single family home. As well, the demographic of first-time buyers and those, so something to do with the condo market is impacted by the fact that usually condos are going to be, many of the buyers are going to be the first-time buyers, people who are looking for a starter home versus those who are also downsizing due to price point, and they want to be able to kind of get into a smaller place for different reasons. And so the condo market tends to have that kind of a niche of buyers. The others is obviously investors as well. So that leads to the last one, which is HOA restrictions. That's something that's different from a single family home, is that you need to consider the whole homeowner association, any financial concerns, and and possible rental restrictions that might come into play. So there's a lot of that that's going on that will make the condo market different from a single family home in terms of people who are considering buying or even selling. Just very quickly, in terms of what the market has been doing, this is taking all the condos in San Mateo County and the median sale price, median meaning half of the homes sold higher than this price as opposed to lower than this price, and half of the homes sold lower than this price. So this is going all the way back to 2005. And you can see this pattern very closely follows single family homes, where we had an increase going on in 2005. And then you see a dip here in 2008 because the beginning of the last recession. And then prices stayed down and continued to decrease until 2012. And then with some ups and downs, steadily increasing. And then 2018, there was a big push. And then since then has been pretty up and down. It's a lot more volatile. The condo market tends to be a lot more volatile in that sense, and at the same time, does not overall change as quickly. So this graph here, if you look at it, it looks very similar to the single family market, but the scale is about half. So whereas we would be talking in the single family market about something like a 1.9 to $2 million range that we're looking around, For condos, it actually goes down to more like between 800 to 900,000. This is taking a look at the number of months of inventory. So for condos, again, condos in San Mateo County, months of inventory has to do with if you were to take all the housing stock that's on the market currently, and then how long would it take to sell all of those listings at the current rate that homes are selling? And what you end up with is is an indicator called months of inventory. And this has to do with if it's generally it's considered, if you have 6 months of inventory, that's considered a balanced market. If it's higher than that, higher than 6 months, that's considered a seller's market. I mean, a buyer's market, sorry. So you have a lot of inventory and you have buyers can have their pick in a way. And then if you go lower than 6 months, then we're talking about a seller's market. And as you can see here, since 2012, 2013, we've been pretty much hovering around the 2-month mark. And this is very similar to what we see for single family homes. But you do see here in this section, right in the 2020, it did jump up more to at one point close to the 4-month mark. And this is very, it has to do with what I mentioned at the beginning, which is that the condos were a little less attractive, I guess I'll put it that way. But if you think about it, as I mentioned, 6 months of inventory is considered the balanced market. So did we go into a buyer's market? Not really. It continued to be, inventory continues to be low and is low and under the 2-month mark. So for the, on average, condos are still doing fairly well in terms of pricing. Median days to sell has to do with how long does it take for a property once it gets put on the market to be able to get into contract. And so for condos in San Mateo County, this lower bar here is 20 days. And so if you say you put a house on the market, you put a listing condo on the market, how long does it take to get the contract? It's been hovering somewhere between about 14 to 20 days. So that is a little bit longer than we would see for a single family home. And then again, when you get here to 2020, there were times when we were hitting, 30 to 35 days or more to be able to sell. So again, the median has to do with half of them sell faster, half of them sell shorter in a shorter period of time. So you do see if I were to take the graph of the single family homes, it would be a little bit more steady than this is, but because of the nature of the condo market, and the condo market is a little bit different in that the location really matters. The finances can matter. Is it a smaller complex, a bigger complex? There are a lot of different other factors involved as well. Here's a look at, this is just in terms of the overall, what affects the overall market. As many of you have probably heard, the Federal Reserve did another half-point rate hike last week. And so as of May 5th, the interest rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage was at 5.27%, which is pretty high for what we've seen in the last few years. Is it the highest it's ever been? No. And I have graphs that I've shown in the past where 5% is really still a great rate. But compared to 3%, 2.5% that people were seeing, definitely it's not there. And so what we're seeing is that because the interest rates are going higher, buyers and the prices have also been going higher, affordability has gone down. And so it's a little more difficult for buyers to buy. For the condo market, as I mentioned before, many of the buyers there may be the first-time buyers. And so they are the ones who are needing to get a mortgage. And so having that increase of 1%, 1 to 2% can impact their buying power. And so what this interest rate effect will be on the market remains to be seen. I think in the short term, we will see, and we have been seeing buyers a little more anxious to be able to buy before they go up any further, but also seeing a little bit of the buyer fatigue setting in. So we'll see how that goes. And this is possible recession. I'm sure if you're reading the news, you hear that daily, several times a day. And the stock market has taken a beating this week. So a lot going on. One thing to note, and I did this covered this in my last seminar, is that price, just because there's a recession doesn't mean that the prices are going to drop. So this is a metric showing how in the last 5 recessions, There was this big drop, yes, and this is nationally in terms of the home price index, but that was a trick. This was a very special recession in that it was triggered or fueled by the housing crisis. So, but beyond that, we've seen the in the other four recessions, at the most in 1991 there was a -2%, and the rest of them, the housing prices actually continue to increase. So, will there be a recession? Many people are expecting that there might be some. Will it make a major impact on the housing market? I think, again, that remains to be seen. And even if it does, it will be local. It will depend on your local market. It will depend on the type of home, the price point, a lot of different factors, but it's not going to be an automatic, drop. And in some cases, we may be able to see house prices continue to increase simply because there's not enough supply out there. So that's what we're seeing in the field. There's still not a lot of inventory out there. And so the demand is still relatively good in terms of the buyers. And we do feel a little bit of shifting here and there. So I would say if anybody's thinking about buying or selling, really important to be aware of the market where you're at in your particular market. So with that, we're going to go into the heart of why everybody joined us here, which is understanding your HOA. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can now, kind of go into a little more of a conversation with Jacquie. And Jacquie Berry is the Community Association data source, and she is a great resource to have. And I'd like to go ahead and have her take it away.
All right. So I'm excited about tonight because I always like to share information with people. I think that knowledge is a big power point for all of us. The more we know, the better off we are. Sometimes I have a 4-year-old granddaughter that knows everything in the whole world, right? So, but it does take a long time to gather information, and we have different reasons why we want information. So today we're going to talk about homeowner associations or condominiums and planned developments, because some of the housing tracts are houses, single family, detached. They're called planned developments. And those are part of the same realm as a condominium because they are under what's called the Davis-Sterling Act. And one of the things that most people, what I do is I like to use a lot of analogies. And one of the analogies I like to use the most is a beach ball. If you have the beach ball up and you're looking at it from your eye level, you will know that you see one color, but you don't know that there's 5 others. And so each one of us have a different reason for needing certain pieces of information. Tonight, I hope we hit everybody, that they get the information that they need, because there's so much to homeowner associations. People always say, oh, how'd you get started? And I said, well, I had a 5-year-old daughter. I was going to college. I had a single family house. I was going through a divorce, and my mother was in real estate. And she goes, honey, there's these things called condos, and it's so nice. You can just move in and they do everything. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty good deal, so I don't have to mow the lawn. I don't have to pull weeds. So I bought a condominium for $12,500. I know that's a shock because of where we are today, but I bought that, and basically it changed my life. I was a marketing major in college, and I got my real estate license, and I was going to do real estate, but I found that I was much more attached to the idea of how these things were run and why they were in existence. And we've got a little 2-minute video that I'm going to go to next, but I wanted to give you some statistics. There are 55,000 associations in the state of California, and 80% of all new construction will be condominiums, not planned developments, not single family houses, but condos. And the reason it is that in real estate, you're always taught one of the first things is that they go for the highest and best use of a piece of land. And right now, the highest and best use for a lot of these pieces of property are close to downtown or business areas. And they're going to convert those with more than likely commercial units on the bottom. And then they're going to go up and have the condominiums. So you're going to see a lot more. We don't have enough housing, just what Jean was saying, there's just not enough. And the market is so pressed for having people to be able to move into these. more and more people that are working really want to go into that kind of housing because number one, they don't have any maintenance they have to do. It's in an area where there's restaurants and shopping that they can do, and they don't have to go far from home, usually closer to their businesses. And so that's the kind of housing that we are going to start seeing. Downtown San Jose has done a major shift on their type of housing, and almost everything down there is either being torn down and rebuilt into condominiums. And it's a massive project, but it certainly is one that has and will affect that area for a long, long time. So Jean, let's go through. We want to talk about, first of all, what is a common interest development is what they're called. And we want to know why they're in existence. So this little 2-minute video should give you a good idea.
The purpose of an association. The defining element of a common interest development is that buyers own a separate interest, a unit or lot, coupled with an interest in the common areas. Because there are elements owned in common by members, someone must take care of them. Under the Davis-Sterling Act, the common areas must be managed by a private membership organization, commonly referred to as a homeowners association, community association, property owners association, or owners association. Membership in the association is automatic when a person buys into the development. The association manages the development through a board of directors elected annually by the membership. The bylaws outline how directors are elected, their term in office, and their duties. In most associations, day-to-day operations are delegated to a management company or an on-site manager and staff. The primary duty of an association is to preserve property values by maintaining, repairing, and replacing common areas. In a condominium development, it means all structures and amenities. In a gated plan development, it's streets, greenbelts, and amenities such as a clubhouse. In addition, associations regulate architectural designs in a community. Secondarily, an association adopts rules and regulations so members can enjoy their property in peace without interference by other members. That means regulating pets, parking, and nuisances such as noise and smoke, and addressing disputes in the community. To enforce its restrictions, associations can impose fines, suspend privileges, and file lawsuits. An important service provided by associations is security. While they can't guarantee it, most associations provide a reasonable level of privacy and security for their members. To pay for operations, associations adopt annual budgets and levy assessments. Members who don't pay their assessments are subject to enforcement that can result in money judgment against the owner and/or foreclosure of their home. Because of these benefits, homeowner associations have grown in popularity with a large and growing percentage of households in the nation now living in common interest developments.
My favorite website is davissterling.com, and it's been put together by Adam Sterling. Larry Sterling, who is the Sterling of the Davis-Sterling Act, is one of the partners in this group. And they have done an amazing job with this website. You can go on there as an index, almost anything you want to know or think you want to know, you can go in there and you can read it. They've done a lot of videos, these little 2-minute ones. I think I really like those the best because it tells you, it talks about a board of directors. And so because these associations are operated by the owners themselves, they elect a group of board members. Now, the board members are not paid. They usually have never run a multi-million-dollar corporation, which these are. You take all the property values, put it together, and that's what they're operating. And again, it said that their job was to maintain, preserve, and enhance those properties. So when you're looking at a homeowner association, it's not just a home, it's also a major corporation. And you're looking at documents. The documents that they were talking about, my first set of documents, which were called the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, were 12 pages long. They're now in the hundreds. And so when you're getting that big stock of documents, when you're getting ready to purchase a condominium, or if you're selling it, you pay your management company to gather those documents together to take care of your obligation to pass those documents on. Well, I'm telling you, there's anywhere from 500 to 1,000 pages in these documents. And what they didn't mention in that one section is sometimes these associations, especially up in Redwood Shores, you'll see this a lot. There's a master association, which is one that takes care of the roads going in, all of the parks, any recreational properties, the big ones. And that is a master association. And there might be up to 16 or more sub-associations, which are individual. Everybody says to me, well, Jacquie, it's a townhouse. And most of the time you'll see the listings will say it's a townhouse. That's a style, not an ownership. If you're looking at it, there's only two kinds of ownerships. Condominium, where you own the airspace, the walls in, the floors up, the ceiling down. You could do whatever you want, wallpaper or whatever. And any major work, like if you're going to move a wall or you're putting in, you're going to remodel a bathroom or something like that, that's major construction. And that is yours to do, but you must go through an architectural committee that has some guidelines that will tell you the types of things. And generally speaking, a lot of people like to do this stuff on their own. But if it is required to have a building permit, and that's generally, I'm not saying it's everywhere, but most of the areas, it's 250 or up. If you're going to spend that, you need to get a contractor. And you've also got to be very conscious that the contractor has a truck and he has employees. You want to make sure that they're licensed and bonded so that if somebody got hurt on the common area or whatever, that it would be protected through the vendors' policies. So in these homeowner associations, some of them are absolutely amazing. And because of the issue that came about down in Florida, where one building completely collapsed on one section, that they showed the picture. David Sterling has got a class that we just took recently about this. And you walked into the lobby and it is marble and windows and glass. It was just gorgeous. And so that was the first part. Then you go to some of the other parts of that lobby area was gorgeous. And they kept saying, well, why do you think the building went down? Well, they really never found out, but it did. And most of it was because they had to go back to the membership to increase the assessments or do special assessments for major repairs, and the people wouldn't vote for it. And so it just kept getting older, and they kept doing cosmetic stuff, but not anything that was really structural. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And of course, that's what happened. Then recently, the lenders have gotten very picky about this. And because of that particular instance, and also because of about some wooden balconies that collapsed in California. We had one in Berkeley that was really a shame. A bunch of young people were out on it and it collapsed and killed, I think, 4 or 5 of them. And that was a disaster. That now these are things that the maintenance, it does say that the association is responsible. It doesn't say that they have the money. And there's no money tree. So the only place they can get it is to come back to the membership and ask them to vote for a special assessment. Now, many of the banks have gotten very smart, and they do what's called a corporate loan. So they will let the association be the corporate umbrella, and they will lend them $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever it is that they need to do the repairs. And then they will have the membership pay it back over a period of, I think the biggest one I've seen is 15 years, but somewhere between 5, 10, or 15 years, they give that to them. And some of you are selling a property or you're buying a property that has a loan on it. If it does, they should have made a policy that when it's sold, the party who owns it at the time that the special assessment happened is basically responsible to pay that off. And the concept is a great one. It says everybody will pay their share of the usage of the components as they own the building. And that is based on a reserve study, which is done every 3 years and then updated with any maintenance that they did the previous year. So by the reserve study, the pro forma operating budget, those are the financial pieces that if you're selling or you're going to purchase a condominium or a planned development, you want to know how financially healthy that corporation is, because that is a big piece of what you're buying. It's pretty much 50% of you've got the property, which you're going to live in, but you've also are attached and cannot detach yourself from that association. And whatever it costs to run that association comes back to your pocketbook.
So
So,
Jackie, if I can just interrupt too,
sure.
in terms of if somebody is buying or selling a condo, what are the documents that they are required, that the property management or the HOA is required to provide for a
Okay,
buyer, and what should the buyer or be looking at and the seller be looking
right.
at? What are, maybe could you go into that a little bit?
Great question. Okay, so the seller is ultimately the responsible party because the association is not a party to your transaction. They are strictly producing the documents on a regular basis, financials, reserve studies, and so forth, and minutes for meetings. So you're gonna, when you go to do it, they'll usually have a list. They have the CAR form and the PRDS form up in our areas, and that will have a list. It's usually articles of incorporation, bylaws, CC&Rs, pro forma operating budget, year-end certified public accountants report as a financial review. I ask for a balance sheet because a year-old set of numbers on a CPA report don't really help you to get a better picture of how financially healthy it is. It also can tell you whether they're going to have a special assessment or not. And then 1 year's worth of minutes. They're not required to provide newsletters, but if you get newsletters, I will tell you that the newsletters give you a picture story and more information. In minutes, it's very sharp, very to the point, and it's just item one, and we discussed it, and we voted on it or we didn't. The board of directors is required every month. There's 10 different financial documents that they have to get and review every month and ratify them in their minutes. Now, some associations by their bylaws only have to have a meeting every quarter. Some of them only twice a year, but there's always they cannot conduct any business or make any contracts or put anything in place unless they have a board meeting and they all vote on it and agree to it. And generally we find that it's not intentional, but the board gets behind doors, does a bunch of stuff, and they forget to tell everybody else, and everybody feels left out. So we say, if you're on the board of directors, it is to your advantage to give your owners enough information. All of your board meetings are required to be as open meetings. Zoom has been absolutely great. I hate the reason we had it, but Zoom has become a very plausible way of getting access to the owners and for them to come. You know, I don't know about you, but when I used to get home, I was tired. I kicked my shoes off and I wasn't going anywhere. So I wouldn't go to the meetings. And the less I went to the meetings, the less that I knew and the more decisions they were making that I didn't like. So now with Zoom, you do have the opportunity to sit in your chair by your computer and kind of spend the hour or hour and a half with them and see what's going on. If you're a member of that association, you can run for the board of directors if you choose to, and then they elect, generally there's between 3 and 7 board members, most commonly 5. And that is whatever your bylaws say you're supposed to have. And it tells you how often you have to meet. And that's one of the things that you really want to take a look at. Some of the smaller associations, the smallest association we've reviewed is 2 units. And that's, I often thought, why did they do that? Because basically the 2 people are going to have to agree to everything or agree to nothing. And that's going to be a real problem. Why did they make it as a condominium? Basically for taxes and to be able to split that particular lot is what the Department of Real Estate really wanted, so that they had to be able to own it And if it's a duplex, you can't separately own a lot without a tax ID. It's usually one per lot. So there's many reasons why they did it. The largest one I've ever reviewed was 4,000 association units. Some of them were townhouses style, some of them were condominiums, some of them were planned unit developments, which were single family houses. It was a mix and match of all kinds of things that sat around a beautiful lake. And the budgets there are extremely complicated. So when you're selling a unit and you get all those documents, some of the agents are using IO for delivery of documents, which is a great product. However, when they run them all together and they give you an index for a buyer, it's too daunting. They get 1,100 pages of documents and they send them away with them and say, you've got 3 days to read, understand, and sign off your contingencies. And so this is kind of where I come in, because nobody really knows, well, what do I really want to know? There's a lot of administrative stuff because your documents are broken into two parts. One is administrative, day-to-day operational stuff, and the other is financial. I say that what a buyer needs to know and what a seller needs to know when they're selling, and this isn't just on the buyer, the seller should know what that financial health of that association is. They have lived there, they've had the advantage of the properties, they've taken advantage of the recreational facilities, and so they should have a handle on that. A lot of times the agents are saying, well, I can't review them, that's not my job. And I'm saying, well, that's why we set this company up, was to be able to help you walk the seller through. Seller's mind, beach ball, they're out. They're gone somewhere else. They've already bought another place. They're ready to move. But you get a buyer in there and the disclosure lies on the seller. The seller should be doing this review. And my basic philosophy is the association should be doing it so that they're not putting out bad documents. We look at anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 transactions a year all over the state of California. The document packages we're getting now are horrible. They're missing so much because nobody's doing any quality control. There's two major libraries that you can deposit them to. One is Condo Certs and the other is HomeWise. Great products. However, if somebody's not managing those documents and understanding what's on that, or cleaning them up from time to time, you go in and you pay several $100s. I think we had one a couple of weeks ago where they paid $800 for a set of documents, and it was missing half of the required documents. So they would never have known that, and they would have passed it on. The buyer would have gotten in there and figured out they didn't get everything, and then go looking for the people that sold it to them and their own agent, plus the agent that listed the property. So I'm saying that we all have a fiduciary duty, whether we're on the board of directors. That fiduciary duty is to the general membership. If you're on the board, I say, get a review, a comprehensive civil code compliance review. We're only the company doing it, but you could do it yourself if you know and understand the laws. The idea is to make sure that it's not just 1,000 pages that's going to someone that you're saying you have 3 days in which to understand these and sign off on them. There's no way, because you didn't understand them when you sold it, right? So
Jacquie, out of those documents, because there are quite a lot, what are the big things that people should look out for? What are some big issues that you see? Or what is the biggest issue that you see?
Okay, I have several things that I'm looking at. One, I like to look at the governing documents. The governing documents, these associations go back to the mid-60s, right? So if they were built in the 60s and their governing documents are still those 12-page set of declarations, it's so old because in 1986, the Davis-Sterling Act became law. It was for many years where it was corporate laws, business and professional laws, and consumer affairs laws, and they were all tied together. Well, every time one of those laws changed, so did the Davis-Sterling, because it was tapped into all of these different laws. So it was not really a good idea. And then a few years back, they changed that and they made the Davis Sterling standalone, even though there's still business and professional codes, corporate codes, and so on. They basically set it aside, and now those change regularly. The governor signs 8 to 10 bills a year. You have the lenders that come in and have their requirements because they're going to give you the money to live there. And I had one of my property managers saying to me the other day, I don't understand why lenders are always asking all these questions. And I said, because they're giving the guy $1 million to buy the place. They own it until he pays that loan off. So it gets very confusing, and everybody goes, I don't want to do this. I don't want to. So I say, you've got to look at the financial. That is one of the biggest pieces. I've done some training classes, and then by the time I get through, they go, I don't want to look at this. Why do you? And it's easy if you understand how it flows, yet everybody has their own format. We know that the boards of directors are supposed to review the financials every month. They don't know how to read them. Nobody teaches them. Some of them don't like to even balance their own checking account, so they hire CPAs, right? So there's a lot of different things that come up. You're selling a multi-million-dollar business and a home, so you've got double duty. If you're selling to an investor, investors need to know the financial health. They may be buying a fixer-upper and not even knowing it. If they're buying a fixer-upper and it keeps hitting their pocketbook for the 2 or 3 years, and they've gone in and completely made it the most beautiful unit on the inside, but they can't do anything because of the way the outside works. It's the visual. The people get two visions. They walk through a complex and they either feel comfortable and at home and safe, and they're ready to go look for that unit. They go into the unit first without walking that project, and they see the inside and they fall madly in love with it. They know exactly where they're going to have their coffee or their drink in the early evening, and that's what they're going for. So we have to move, whether they're sellers want to move on, we want them to move on, but they need to know what they're selling. You can't sell a car if it doesn't have an engine. And I said to somebody the other day, I said, I bought a car once, and in 3 weeks' time after I got it home, I had 3 flat tires. So it's the budgets to me are like the treads on your tires. You have to know that it's safe. And so these are parts, regardless of what position you're in. If you're buying it because you're going to live there, or you're going to have your mother and dad live there, those are things that you have to really be aware of. We have a bigger issue now with the new laws, with the new lender laws, because there's a form called 1076. And 1076 is a condominium questionnaire. I said condominium. So planned developments are not really attached to that. And it was really interesting. I said to one of the lenders, I said, I have two projects right next door to each other, built by the same builder. They were going to all be one, but they didn't merge them together. And so you got 2 separate projects, but one of them is a planned development where they own the land as well as the unit. And the other one is truly a condominium. The condominium was built first. And in the olden days, we used to sue the developers if the tile in the patio didn't look right? So developers got very smart over the years, and they started building planned developments because the only person that could sue them for the interior stuff was the owner of the unit. The association could only do common area stuff, landscaping, a swimming pool, things of that nature. So the CC&Rs are very telling about which kind of property that you're buying. And then you have to go one step further. You've got to look and see who's responsible for what maintenance, because that's the other big issue that pops up. Everybody says to me, well, who's responsible for the roof, or who's responsible for the patios or the decks? And now there's a new mandate by the state of California that wooden decks on condominiums that are cantilever off of the buildings now have to be inspected. And if they're 7 years or under, you could do spot checking. But if they're older than that, it's recommended that you investigate every single one of them. And about 7 or 8 months ago, and that has to be done, excuse me, by September 1st, 2025.
January 1st.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, you're right. January 1st. All of a sudden I said September. I don't know what I did that. So thank you. January 1st, 2025. Well, the engineering, it has to be done by an engineering company or someone who is an architect. They have to be licensed and they have to have a certain designation because there has to be a report on every one of those. And the first one that I had about 2 years ago, before this really came down on everybody, was they started going in and found out they had to replace the entire deck on 86 condominiums. It cost well over $12 million. So that money, the only place they get it is from the individual homeowners. And that wasn't a budgeted item on the reserve. So they had a real big problem, and a lot of people tried to sell, but found out they couldn't sell because somebody else didn't want to buy that problem unless they paid for it. So we're looking at different things for different reasons. And whether you're, whatever side of the transaction you're on, there are certain things you need to know. But always, always, regardless of what side you're on, you need to know the financial health of that association.
So we actually have like a couple questions, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface of things, but we're actually running out of time. I think one of the two of the questions that are coming in have to do with, one has to do with if you don't agree with what your board is doing, what are the things that you can do? What are the recourses? And then something, Shibian had a similar question, which is the builder went bankrupt and is out of business now. And I'm assuming this is a new complex. And so the HOA doesn't want to entertain requests for warranty for the unit. So what are some options? So it's kind of, I think this is very specific, but I think in terms of if people have an issue with their board or not getting the documents that you need or things like that, what is the recourse for that?
Okay, good. And then the other one on the warranty issue where the developer went bankrupt, I'll take that after because there and warranties. Okay, so when we're talking about homeowner associations and what you can do about your board of directors, you elect them. So they have to have an election, depending on your bylaws. They have 1 or 2 year terms. So you have the right to vote them off. As a homeowner, you have the right to get on that board of directors. You might want to get on and be a participant in that board. That's 2 things that can happen. If they're really out of whack with the civil codes and what they're supposed to be doing versus what they are doing, that could take a lawsuit by several of the homeowners there to get rid of them. And your bylaws will tell you exactly how you can get rid of a board of directors that's not doing their job. So each individual set of documents was done by a different attorney. And that would be the first place that I would go, is how are they elected and how can you terminate their position on that board of directors? And the second part, I think, which is a big one, is are you willing to step up to go and be on that board of directors? We had when I did my management company, it was kind of interesting. We couldn't get anybody to be on the board of directors. So I got an idea. I got a fishbowl, but I cut up a mailing list and put it in the bowl. And the next day I sent out 5 letters telling them congratulations, they were on the board of directors. They weren't really happy about it, but there is something that happens that if you can't get a board of directors, you can't conduct business. You have to have a quorum of whatever the number is. So a quorum of 5, a quorum of 3, 2 people, it's really hard, but you're allowing those people to make all of your decisions for you. And if they're not making the decisions that you would like to see them do, attend meetings, just kind of set it up. You're not there to beat them up because you're doing it as a volunteer. They've probably never run a corporation and certainly never an association in the majority of the cases. So it's new to them. The website that I talk about, the David Sterling website, is excellent to get information. ECHO is an executive council of homeowners. There's several organizations that you can join. But the idea here is if you're really having a problem with that board of directors, which I did have one not too long ago, the guy was the board president of I think it was a 3-unit project, and the other 2 people ganged up on him and literally made his life miserable. And so he ended up having to sue the other 2 to get some relief, and that's in the process now. The ultimate, which is if you can't get a board of directors, nobody wants to do it right, you can hire a management company, but you cannot defer the obligation or the responsibilities to that manager. You have to be a board of directors. They're strictly an employee or a contract. They're basically contracted. So the ultimate is that if all fails and it's just so dysfunctional, and I usually say most of the associations in the state are dysfunctional families, because they are. We all live too close together. Nobody likes the way somebody else is doing certain things. So you can put it into receivership. Receivership is where you would petition the court. The courts would have an attorney who was the responsible party at the go-between the court and the association, and they would hire a management company, and the members would no longer have any vote. If there was something that needed to get done, you'd get a bill. And it's costly, the least way that I would say solve a problem. There are so many other ways of doing it. But if you've got a specific issue or problem, give me a call. I'm not an attorney, but I can certainly guide you and tell you whether or not you're going to need one, you know.
Yep. And definitely we'll be sharing information on the Davis Sterling website, because that's a really good resource that I've looked at as well. I never noticed the video, so I definitely want to go back and look at those. And then we'll be sharing Jackie's information also. In terms of Kathy is also a realtor and asked about breaking down disclosures. And I think you mentioned that as well, that when there's a whole packet, it's probably better to separate them all out, right? Not to provide a PDF that's 300 pages long, but to actually make it individually. Is that what you
Yes,
recommend?
and what's happening is, remember that the association keeps them and produces them as separate documents.
Right.
So if you take that document set that you actually get from them and you leave it like that, for instance, when I do it, I break them down and I have it in a certain order. Like the first thing I always have in there is the insurance policy. So the demand from the association, then the insurance policy, because that's a big deal. You have to, just because the association has a master policy does not mean that you don't have to have your own policy that covers over and above what they have, including liability insurance on the inside of your unit. In some instances, you're going to want, it's not really a full flood, but if your dishwasher, your garbage disposal, or your toilet, or your washing machine goes over and damages another unit, you're going to want to have some coverage. I just had one the other day where the association had a $10,000 deductible, and the bill was really only $980 or $9,080. So the owner had to pick that tab up. Well, if they had gotten a rider on their policy, it could have been reduced where they would have paid maybe $1,000. Their agency would pay the rest of up to the 10,000, and then the associations would have kicked in if that were necessary.
And so with insurance, somebody had a question, I can't remember who, regarding earthquake insurance. Do you look for earthquake insurance, or what are your thoughts on that? Just briefly.
Okay, so insurance, I look at all of them, and I do like it when I see earthquake. The percentage is very small of the associations that have gotten, even though we're living in an earthquake area. But that again is a vote of the general membership as to whether they want to pay the extra funds to do and get that. Most of the time, individuals cannot, in a condominium or a townhouse that's connected, get individual insurance for that.
And I would say I do actually have a resource for Changchi that we use actually for our condominium, where the complex actually pays a small fee. I think it's like $900 a year, And then that allows each homeowner to opt into an insurance, their own earthquake insurance
Yes.
policy.
It's kind of like an umbrella so that they can
Right.
go out and access their own to
Right.
cover it for them.
So there are companies like that. And then can you go a little bit into just the financials and what you're looking for there? I know you said budget,
Sure.
but like a reserve study, maybe talk a little bit about that.
Okay, reserve studies, a physical inspection is required every 3 years, and then they update the reserve study every year with work that they did the previous year that would adjust the numbers. So if you've done half of your roofs, then those numbers would change drastically because we're looking to see what the total cost and how it breaks out so that you know what's supposed to be in the reserves today. Let me give you a quick example. If you have a roof and it's $100,000 roof and it's a 10-year life, you're supposed to be putting $10,000 aside each year for that specific component. And you do that with every component in that budget. So if you're putting that money away, you will have enough money. Now, most of the time, associations, the people that are in a certain category price-wise don't have that kind of money. They don't want to spend it. And they'll say, leave it to the guy. I'm not going to be here when the roof needs to be replaced. Let Jackie pay for it, or with the person that owns it at that time. That's not the way that it works. You have a fiduciary duty to maintain that reserve in a level that is where you don't have to do large increases, special assessments, or bank loans, which is basically a special assessment. The lenders are looking at that very closely now. If you're getting up into the $1 million, the guy who's running the board of directors say, hey, I'm not putting that money in their bank. I'm going to go use that money to make money. And we'll all pay it at the end. Well, a lot of times the general membership just decided we'll pay special assessments whenever work needs to come due. Now the lenders are looking at that with a great deal of disgust because you're leaving the debt behind for somebody else. It's like you've had a credit card. You've charged it up. It's now time to close escrow. And you say, oh, by the way, I have this credit card I want you to pay for. And I had one the other day. I knew there was a problem with it. I just couldn't figure out. I could feel it. I could see something, but I didn't know exactly what it was. Come to find out that 2 days before our client was going to close escrow, they had passed $189,622 special assessment per door.
Wow.
That's a big number. So you want to know what that number is? In this market, you're probably not going to negotiate it. Sometimes you can, but at that same time, you know about it, you can plan for it. So that's a big thing that we're looking for. The other thing we're looking for is whether or not they've done those reserves and whether it's been done with a physical inspection and it's not the board of directors taking a cup of coffee and a box of donuts and walking the project.
So you said the reserve study is due it required every 3 years for a physical inspection and then an update every year
Yes.
And is that for all complex, even a 2-unit? Is that?
Yep. Doesn't make any difference. They haven't discriminated. The big thing that's kind of interesting on that is every 3 years, they should do a physical inspection. Well, they're visual inspections, not destructive testing. But now the reserve studies have taken a whole new turn and they go out and they're looking for damaged water spots underneath the decks, the stairwell that's kind of, lopsided, anything that's wood, they're going to start looking at. And then they go back to the board and say, we believe that you should have experts, engineering and or general contractors come out and give you estimates and look at all of these. And that's where that balcony issue came in, but they're still doing it with any of these reserves. So there are things that the board has to be realistic, that things do not last forever. And as you get older, it costs a little more to maintain them. So, and then every year they're supposed to update. So if they did roofs or siding or the roads got redone or the playground got rebuilt, those things are adjusted. The numbers are adjusted accordingly. Board members that try to do these reserve studies on their own because they look at it and say, oh, nobody called us and said their roof leaked. Well, that's only part of it. So be realistic and make sure that the association that you're buying into is following that specific regulation so they know.
Well, thank you. And we're at 8 o'clock. So I
I
feel like
can't
we
believe.
just got started. But thank you so much. I think the for me, kind of the takeaway is whether you own one or thinking about owning one, important to look at what documents you have been provided with and make sure that the financials are good. And we do have resources that we'll be sending out. But also, Jackie, if I wanted to give you a little bit of time to talk kind of your main takeaways, and then also maybe talk a little about your company, your service that you provide. I'd like to
Okay.
make sure that you have a chance to do that.
Great. Okay. So because we're finding that most of the time the boards of directors do not understand those documents that they have to produce every year, and then they get put into like a shoebox, and then they're passed out whenever somebody calls on them to do that, we have to be a little more prudent. The board of directors really has an obligation and a fiduciary duty to make sure that the documents that they are putting out are timely, which are the governing documents, the budget, the reserve study, and that they are holding minutes where they're conducting business, and that that's going out and that the people know about it. So I started this company back in 1999, sold my property management company. I owned a mortgage company for 7 years. So I had a little bit of all these different pieces that allow me to know, how to maneuver around all of this. And one of the things that I started the company is because I had so many of my real estate agent friends saying, we don't have any idea what we got. Look at this pile of documents. And we used to copy every single one of them, right? And then pass them on to a buyer who didn't know where to start. So basically, I tried to make it a little bit easier. Our report is about 15 pages long, but the first 7 are comments on each area of consideration, like the insurance, the governing documents. If the governing documents are more than 7 years old, the way that the laws have been and the new things that have come up, such as the rental restriction area and things of that nature, they really need to consider updating, and that needs to be a regular thing, maybe every 7 to 10 years at the max. And if you keep just amending the governing documents, you have so many different recordings. Also, if you're an agent or a seller, make sure you're looking at your preliminary title report and matching it, because we're finding a lot of things that are missing off of those, or things that you will have on those that the management company doesn't. And I try and share all that information with managers if I can. So we find Waldo in the documents, basically. And right now we've got a big elephant in there, which are the decks and some of the other, the lenders. So he's harder to find. You can certainly do it, but it takes us 3 hours to 5 hours to do a set of documents. So for you, it might take a little bit longer, but that certainly is your privilege. And we like to help people because the concept is a good one. It's not going away. It's getting bigger.
And
So
what
we
is the
all need to
cost?
work together.
And what's the cost?
I need to. Okay, so
I
our
know
fee
you don't
is
want
five.
to.
I know. $575 is our fee. If you're on the seller side, we will give you a list that you just cut and paste and send it back to the management company to access the remaining documents. They sometimes don't have them, but at least you know that you're protecting. That's an insurance policy for the seller that they did their due diligence and didn't get everything, and then you know what it was. On the buyer side, we do offer a half-hour phone conversation at the end with the agent and the clients, and they can ask questions about the documents. And if you have a question up front when we're reviewing the documents, we will find that and make note of it for you specifically.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did want to highlight that service for, I know we try not to do a sales pitch, but I think 575 is very reasonable for understanding an investment that is, in many cases, $1 million or, little less, $500,000 or more, right? To be able to understand an investment and make sure that things are being run properly. I know, especially when we're trying to buy or sell, the condo documents feels like just this extra big packet that is unknown, but I think it's really important to have some evaluation of it and understand what you're getting into, especially for a buyer. So with that, I'm gonna just go to a few things, but thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank you.
Before I say anything else, but I did want to go back and kind of reshare. This is a look at the website. This is the Davis Sterling website that was referenced.
Yes.
And so we will be sending that out in the follow-up email, but there are a lot of helpful resources. You can actually see on the left-hand side, they have the whole categories broken down alphabetically. You can actually go on there and search for statutes. There's a video library. There's a lot of great resources there. And then this is Jackie's information. And again, I'll be sharing that with the group as well. And I'd like to just really thank everyone for joining us. We are past our time, but especially thank you so much for Jacquie for just all
Thanks.
the wealth of information and examples that you're providing. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a
Thank
good evening.
you.